What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we begin our talks on the Bladesinging Wizard, one of the most famous archetypes out there, the Gish, right? The ability to mix magic and sword, but does the wizard do it right? We will have to find that out today. But before we do that, make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make sure to share the video with your friends, and of course, click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded. This is a very, very famous archetype, and the wizard has one, just like we've talked about in the past with things like the Eldritch Knight on the Fighter series, which I'll put up in the iCard above for you, as well as the Hexblade when it comes to the Warlock, which I will put up there as well. It may not be immediate, but depending on timing, it'll be up there. But yeah, it's a very, very famous thing, and the wizard has its own way of doing it. So while the idea may not be unique, its implementation certainly is. And on top of such a powerful class, does this add to it, or does it take away and try to do too many things? We're going to find that out right after a word from our sponsor. If you are looking for a great gift this upcoming Christmas season, then the Wandering Tavern by Homie and the Dude is the perfect one for the TTRPG lover. This system-agnostic setting features 15 floors and 23 unique locations for you to explore on a massive airship. Interact with the various factions to learn all of the mysteries held within this vessel. Learn recipes for unique benefits and even compete in a bake-off. If you like the work of Studio Ghibli, then this is absolutely the one for you. Learn more with the link below and use code DAPPER10 to receive 10% off at checkout. And of course, by doing so, you will be supporting my channel. Thank you again to Homie and the Dude for supporting the channel, and let's get back to the video. So to kick things off, at level 2, we get training in war and song, and this is kind of our ribbon feature, sort of, and then we'll get something a little bit more practical in just a second. Once we get this, we get proficiency in light armor and one type of one-handed melee weapon of our choice. In addition, we also get proficiency in the performance skill. So for this being somewhat of a ribbon feature, at least comparatively so, this is a very useful ribbon feature because we normally would not have access to armor proficiency. This just gives it to us, so we don't have to go searching in the fighter class, we don't have to go somewhere else to get it, we don't have to necessarily find it with a different race. It is all here, which is really, really cool. We're going to be using dexterity for making our attacks, and so that is absolutely perfect. This allows us to do that, and it mixes that with having a higher armor class, and I like that. One thing to think about with this entire class as a whole, and this really will not go into effect for any of my individual rankings of features, but it will come into play at the very end when I look at the whole thing, is that this does become a little bit mad rather than sad. Sad, of course, single ability dependent versus multiple ability dependent for mad. This means we do need dexterity in order for our weapon attacks to be a little bit more useful because we do not inherently get a way to attack with intelligence. Just something to keep in mind there. Of course, this can be remedied through some light multi-classing, which of course we will talk about a little bit later and possibly in a build later this week if this ranks well enough. But either way, armor proficiency and proficiency with a melee weapon that we didn't have before. We're probably going to be taking a weapon that has finesse in order to be able to use the dexterity so that it works with our armor class. You could take something that's strength based if you want to, but I don't recommend doing that. But yeah, overall this is pretty cool. The performance skill is meh, you know, we don't have a great charisma, so it's not the best thing to worry about right now, but armor and a weapon, pretty darn good. I'm gonna give this an 8 out of 10. I like the ability to add all this on without having to look elsewhere. It just tightens up the kit just a little bit more. Also at level 2, we get Blade Song, and this is the main reason why we are here. This basically allows us to go into a state. So, you know, we have some transformative type of features that we've talked about in the past. This is similar to that in function, but essentially it allows us to enter a state as a bonus action, which is really cool. And as long as we're not wearing armor, that is medium or heavy, then we can do this. And it gives us some really, really cool benefits. So as a bonus action, we can enter this state for 1 minute, as long as we're not wearing medium or heavy armor. It ends if we are incapacitated or put on armor that disqualifies us, or use 2 hands to make an attack with a weapon. Very important distinction. I'll talk about that here in a second. We can also dismiss this at any time with no action. While it is active, we get the following things: a bonus to our AC equal to our intelligence modifier, an additional 10 feet on our walking speed, advantage on acrobatics checks, and a bonus to any constitution checks made to maintain concentration equal to our intelligence modifier. And we can do this a number of times per day equal to our proficiency bonus. This is kind of wild, right? Bonus action to enter this state. Wizards don't use their bonus actions a ton, outside of a couple of spells here and there. So that's totally fine. And again, as long as we're not wearing medium or heavy armor, we don't get proficiency inherently anyway, so who cares? I'm not really worried about that. And besides, I want my dexterity to be pretty high anyway, so it's fine. I really don't care about that restriction at all. Now, the only restriction is that we cannot use 2 hands to make an attack. That's very specific because, of course, the versatile property is very much a thing. So this means that if you take a weapon that is typically one-handed but could be used two-handed to up that damage, you cannot use that option and maintain your blade song. So very important. Be careful with that, but it also means that things like the rapier or the short sword, right? We're not missing out by taking something like that. We're not missing out on something that's versatile, so it's not that bad, honestly. We get a bonus to our AC, which is fantastic, equal to our intelligence modifier. Hopefully that is going to be very, very high, 3, 4, or 5, at least here at the beginning, depending on your table and how you do stats. Extra walking speed, fantastic. Acrobatics checks could be good, just depending. And being able to maintain concentration on spells easier, amazing. Absolutely amazing. Every bit of this is great. And so, surprising no one, this is a 10 out of 10 feature. I don't think that there's any way that I can hate on this pretty much at all, honestly. I think the amount of time it lasts is great. The initiation on a bonus action is great. All the benefits are great. There's nothing I can complain about. At level 6, we get extra attack. Now, I've talked about extra attack a lot in the past when we've talked about other classes. Not a ton of subclasses get it, but there are a few, and this is one that is very unique. So, of course, we can make more than one attack now as part of the attack action, just like normal. However, we also get one additional benefit. We can also cast a cantrip instead of one of our weapon attacks. Now this is pretty cool, right? Because if we've got a couple of enemies around us, we can do this in a different combination of ways. We can make an attack on somebody that's near us, and maybe we can firebolt somebody else to pick something off if we wanted to do that. We could take something like Thunderclap, right? Which gives us a little bit of a burst in damage, right? However, the much more prominent one is going to be Booming Blade, right? Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade, depending on what you take. That's going to be the main one, the primary one that we go with as our extra attack, is being able to do that as one of our actions, which is really, really good. I always give extra attack a 10 out of 10. This is no exception. Again, this pushes it even further than what a lot of other classes even go, and it just makes it really, really stand out. Being able to Booming Blade and still make an attack is incredible. That's something that normally you would have to be a fighter in order to do something like that, in order to have 2 separate actions with Action Surge. That's what you normally would do. This allows you to do it, and it's fantastic. At level 10, we get Song of Defense, and this adds a little bit of defensiveness to our already amazing Blade Song. So with this, whenever we are in our Blade Song and we take damage, we can use our reaction to expend a spell slot and reduce the damage taken by an amount equal to 5 times the spell slot's level. This is also pretty fantastic, right? This is as a reaction, so you know how much damage you're taking. So this isn't something like, well, I'm gonna blow a random spell slot and hope that it's enough, or hope that I don't overblow it, right? We know how much damage we're taking, so you're not gonna waste something, and you can kind of calculate that out based on if it is worth it. Maybe you need to just stay up barely on something, and this helps you to survive. Great. Do that. If it's a really small hit, you could shrug it off as long as you don't want to get rid of a spell slot. Now, spell slots are a very, very precious commodity, even here at level 10. So we do, of course, have to make sure that we're being careful with this, but at 5 times a spell slot, that's pretty fantastic, right? You know, if we're using a 5th level spell slot, that's 25 damage, and depending on the situation, that may or may not be worth it. Now, in most cases, it may not be, but sometimes it might, if it gets you out of that sticky situation so that you're not being a burden to your cleric or to whoever. There's definitely a situation where I can see it being used. However, I can't say that it's going to be the best feature. It's certainly not a 10 out of 10, just because avoiding damage is always better than reducing damage. And so for that reason, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. I think the reduction is a decent amount. I think it's fine. Just as a mechanic, using up spell slots is maybe not the best, and having to reduce damage rather than adding it to our AC. Now listen, our AC is already sky high, okay? This is probably more so when we're failing a saving throw of some kind, because think about it, if you've got a really decent dexterity, your AC is probably really, really good with the +5, hopefully by this time, on our intelligence. Your AC's through the roof, so it's probably on something you failed a saving throw on, and it just kind of is what it is. So yeah, I don't think I can give this quite as high marks as I've given some other things, but it's okay. Finally, at level 14, we get Song of Victory, and this just adds a little bit of extra icing on top of the cake. With this, we can now add our intelligence modifier to our damage with our melee weapon attacks as long as we are in Blade Song. It's just free damage. Again, this should hopefully be +5 damage to every attack that we make, and this is on top of everything else that we do. There's no limited use of this. The only thing that I wish that this was is that it technically made your weapons magical if they aren't already. Hopefully at level 14 you have some kind of magical weapon, otherwise you probably haven't been that happy with how things are going, but it would be nice for it to have added that. But overall, it's really not a huge deal because, again, you probably have a magical weapon by this point. At least I hope you do. Otherwise, your DM's kind of mean. It is what it is. So, yeah, it's still really good damage. I think it's great. There's no real frills to it. It's pretty plain and simple. I've got to give this a 9 out of 10. I think it's great being given all of this extra damage just caked on top of our already amazing Blade Song. So what do we think of the Bladesinging Wizard? Now, if you have paid attention to D&D history throughout the 2014 versions, you will know that this actually used to be restricted to only elves, because this is technically an elven tradition. If that was still the case today, my ranking would be much, much lower than what it is going to be. Any kind of restriction like that is going to be pretty bad. And so it's kind of surprising how good this is, considering it came from the Skag book, which is full of just misses, just really bad stuff. It's wild that this comes to us from that book originally, but either way, here we are, and boy, this is incredible. Being able to boost our AC, being able to concentrate on spells easier, reduce damage, deal extra damage, have extra attack in combination with some amazing cantrips like Booming Blade. There is just so much going on here. It helps us basically in every way as a wizard, and just allows us to do something new that other wizards really can't do, at least anywhere near as well as this one can, without necessarily taking away from our spell casting. Now, obviously, we are going to be using weapons instead of casting spells on certain turns, but basically this just means that instead of us casting Firebolt and sitting in the back for everything, This allows us to get up in people's faces, and maybe you want to take, say, an inflict wounds, right? Because you're up in people's faces and you want to deal a bunch of damage. This really expands on your options, and so this allows you to be an aggressive wizard and be a tanky wizard. And I would say this actually could be even seen as more tanky than the actual abjuration wizard, which we talked about recently. It's kind of wild just how tanky this actually can be. Yeah, our hit points aren't the best, but I mean, who cares when our AC is like 25? Like, you know what I mean? Like, who cares when your AC is through the roof? It's you just shrug off a ton of stuff, and for that, this is amazing. And so, like I said, with looking at all of our stats and everything, was having to split those stats between two things. The having damage reduction rather than avoidance with Song of Defense. With all of that together, this is still a 10 out of 10. I don't know if you expected anything different, but it's gotta be a 10 out of 10. Just Bladesong is just so good, and the additions that we get to it are just so good. There's just really not much that I can complain about. I'm being nitpicky to try to find some things that you may find some small frustrations with, but man, they are minimal. They are very minimal. So I am excited to be building one of these later this week, and I hope you all are looking forward to that as well. So until next time, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.